Greetings and welcome to our video presentation. We are talking today about Mystery Babylon, Identity Revealed. An enlightening study in the book of Revelation and other places we're going to see. A crucial key to understanding and interpreting the events of the book of Revelation. And there's my email if you want to write that down or come back to that if you want to email me regarding any of this. I can send you more information. All right. Some crucial facts about Mystery Babylon. First of all, we're going to go through these pretty quick as we continue here. Feel free to stop the video as much as you'd like. Read all the scriptures, pray, ponder these thoughts. You might want to go through this more. We're going to present a lot of information very fast. The good thing is you can stop the video as you need to and rewind to go the speed you like. All right. John is shown a judgment. He's carried into the wilderness. Mystery Babylon is a mother. We're going to get into all these things. She's drunk with blood. She's carried by the beast. She sits on 7 heads or mountains, and the beast destroys her. And Mystery Babylon is a city. All right, you can see all those. It's from Revelation 17. All right. Now, an interesting contrast in Revelation we're going to deal with. There's 2 women are revealed in Revelation. They are the harlot, Mystery Babylon, we're going to talk about, and the bride of Christ. These are connected to 2 cities, and a comparison of Mystery Babylon and the New Jerusalem is very revealing and important. We'll be doing toward the end of the video. All right. A close look at the identity of New Jerusalem is also very relevant and important, as you will see. All right. All this and much more helps us interpret the book of Revelation. The context of Revelation is crucial, and we're going to explain our context angle from here. Now, the historical context of who John was inspired to write and send the book to originally. He was told by Jesus, write it and send it to the 7 churches, and they are named there in Revelation 1:11. The time indicators in the book of Revelation give key insight into interpreting it. The very first book, it says, write these things which must shortly come to pass. Go down to verse 3. It says, the time is near. All right, I'm going to read Revelation 22:6 here, and it says, and he said unto me, these sayings are faithful and true, and the Lord God and the holy prophets sent his angel to show unto his servants the things which must shortly be done. Now we got to think of this in the context of how the original recipients of the book would have looked at it, and that's the way we're going to interpret it. There's a saying that says it was all written for us, but it was not all written to us. And that is so true here in the book of Revelation. We can glean and interpret things from it, which we're going to see a main part of it today. And however, it wasn't originally sent to us. It was originally sent to these people in the 7 churches. All right, the reigning king of the time of John writing the book in Revelation 17:10, it says here, and there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen. 1 is, there's the present tense to John, and the John's readers, I should say. The other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. All right, so 1 king is, and I get to that into that in the other video, so I'm not going to get into that right now. All right, the present tense of the city. Revelation 17:18 says, the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Doesn't say will be in the distant future or will be in the future, nothing like that. He's given present tense language that the city was in existence at the time of him writing it. All right? Now the instructions given to John not to seal the book. This is huge. And I deal with this more in the other, but let me just mention this. Book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 4. Daniel is told Daniel is told to seal the book to the time of the end. However, you come here to John's writing of Revelation at the end, he is told very specifically, do not seal the book. Let me read the verse, Revelation 22:10, and he said to me, do not seal up the words of this prophecy, for the time is near. So we can see these all paint a picture and give us insight into the context of Revelation and how the original recipients would have looked at these things based on these verses that give us the context and help us understand the time frame of the events. All right? Now, there's reasons why the harlot isn't Rome. Many pick some form of Rome, Roman Catholic Church, different things like that, as being the harlot, but I'm going to give you reasons why this cannot be the case. All right? So most believe the beast is Rome or the Roman Empire. In fact, practically everybody does, regardless of which time frame they interpret Revelation to be for. And the beast it talks about inflicts horrible devastation on the harlot, burns her with fire. We're going to see some of that. If Rome was the beast and the city of Rome is also the harlot, this would be Rome inflicting this horrible punishment on itself, which is extremely unlikely. All right? Now it says that in the harlot was found the blood of prophets, 1824 Revelation there. However, crucial point, Rome or the Roman Empire never did not kill, didn't kill the prophets. Rome never did. Disqualified as a possible candidate. The scriptures will reveal clearly, crystal clearly, in this video who did, so please stay tuned. All right? So Rome also doesn't fit with the context, the time indicators, the overall theme of how the book of Revelation is the revealing of Jesus Christ, and we are going to look at all that as we progress. All right? Moving right along. One city fits the criteria. We're going to let the cat out of the bag early here. The only city that represents a group of people, which is what we're going to see it all talking about, that was around at the time when John wrote Revelation, that was relevant to his readers, that was called a mother, the only one that killed the prophets, crucial point, that rode the beast or relied on the Roman Empire, is none other than first century Jerusalem. That's a bold statement, I know. Please don't tune me out. Stay tuned. And now let's move on to see the abundant evidence to prove that Jerusalem is the only possible candidate that fits the criteria. You will be astounded. This is exciting. Let's move along. All right? First century Jerusalem, the mother city, where the apostate Jews who rejected the Messiah continued on the old covenant, and the ones that coerced the Romans to kill Jesus Christ, as most of you know. All right? Now, previously, 7 woes by Jesus had been pronounced on the Jewish leaders, associating them with Jerusalem as their mother. All right? We're going to look more at this in a little bit, but the 7 woes also appears in Revelation. Now, he specifically prophesied about the destruction of the city and temple. We're going to get into scriptures also. Matthew 21 and 22 makes some points we're going to deal with. And then he go into Matthew 24 after that. Same account is in Mark 13 and Luke, called the Olivet Discourse, where Jesus very specifically predicts and prophesies the destruction of the city and the temple. All right? Jesus also spoke about the city being destroyed in the parable in Matthew 22. I mentioned this in the other video, that the city is destroyed, then there's a marriage party for the son, and after the city is destroyed in Revelation, you have the marriage supper of the Lamb, coinciding exactly with the parable in Matthew 22. Now, Jesus wept over the city, making several declarations about it. We're going to look at this in a moment. Jerusalem is said to be a mother on several occasions. All right? Let me read Luke 13:34. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together, he says, implying it as a mother, just as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not have it. Right? Declared as a mother, they would not have it. The same type of thing is said in Matthew 23 and 37. Excuse me. All right? Now, here in Luke 19:41 to 44, it says, when he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, if you had known this day, even you, the things which make for peace. But now they have been hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will throw up a barricade against you and surround you and hem you in on every side, and they will level you to the ground and your children within you. And they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation. Here he's predicting the destruction of the city and calling it a mother. All right, interestingly enough, he's on the way to the cross, I believe it was. They come to him, And it says in Luke 23:28, but Jesus turning to them said, daughters of Jerusalem, once again applying a mother, daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. Because he knows what's coming down in the city about 40 years down the road. All right? Now the last verse here about this little portion is Galatians 4:25. Says here, this is written to the Galatian church in the first century, which is what we're dealing with. Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. How much clearer could it be? Jerusalem as a mother and is in slavery, and other versions talk about it as in bondage with her children. And we'll explain more about that as we go along. Now, John was carried away in the Spirit into the wilderness to see this, the harlot. That's where he's carried to see it, if you read there in Revelation 17. All right? Now, interestingly, another time frame in the wilderness is contrasted at the beginning of the Old Covenant era, where unbelief also caused many problems and judgment. All right, we're going to look at just a couple portions of Scripture. Here in 1 Corinthians 10:5 and 6 says, nevertheless, with most of them God was not well pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness. Now these things happen as examples for us, so that we would not crave evil things as they also craved. So he's talking about wilderness situation then. There's a wilderness with this time frame of the first century Jerusalem. It's also a 40-year period. They wandered in the wilderness 40 years. Many parallels between that 40 years and the 40 years between Jesus coming. You know, Moses came and brought the Old Testament law. Jesus comes and brings the New Testament law, so to speak, the new way of grace. Right? 40 years between him predicting the temple's destruction, and it happened. He gave the Jews that amount of time before the city was destroyed to come to faith. All right? And then the verse here in 1 Corinthians 10:11. Now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. We deal with this in our end time and end of the ages videos. Also, if you haven't seen those, it would be great to go see those as well. There's 4 parts, and they're all pretty short. All right. Also now in Hebrews 3:17, and with whom he was angry for 40 years, was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? All right, so very interesting contrast there. We can make a whole video just out of that, with the 40 years at the beginning of the Old Covenant era and this 40-year period between Jesus predicting the temple's destruction and it actually occurring. All right, now the harlot sits on a scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. The harlot was arrayed in scarlet and purple, adorned with gold, jewels, and pearls. Revelation 17:3 and 4. Okay, now the scarlet beast is the Roman Empire, whom the apostate Jews were in alliance with and were carried by for their religious and political influence. John 15, they says, we have no king but Caesar. And they did this, and they persuaded and manipulated and coerced the Romans to kill Jesus, although they were biblically held responsible for it. And there's many other verses that talk about that they tried to get the Romans to deal with, Paul and different things that happened. And Nero had a bunch of Christians killed at that time and different things like that. Now the scarlet reference is likely a reference to Rome's imperial dignity. Now the harlot arrayed in purple and scarlet is possibly depicting garments of false royalty in contrast to the adornment of the true bride. This would go along with this next point here, where the colors could also be a reference to the attire the Jewish priests wore when they were in good standing with God. And you can read these scriptures here in Revelation 21 and those in Exodus there at the bottom, that if they were wearing these colors continuing on, which is what, the apostate Jews, they didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah, they had him killed, and they continued on in the Old Covenant in the city and the temple. And Jesus pronounced all these different, judgments on them and then caused them to be carried out. So, if they wore this scarlet and purple, it was of no, validity now that they are blind, staying in the Old Covenant after Jesus purchased the New. All right, moving along. Revelation 17:5, and on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes or harlots and of earth's abominations. All right? All right, let's look at some of this here. Now, rebellious Israel was described before as having a harlot's forehead. Is it not interesting? We got Mystery Babylon written on the forehead here in Revelation. Now, interestingly, the mark of the beast is put on the forehead there, if you want to read Revelation 13:16. Right after that, interestingly, the 144,000, oops, I should have another zero there, are on Mount Zion and have their father's name on their forehead. All right? Now, the negative description on the harlot's forehead is in stark contrast to what was written on the turban the priest wore on his forehead that said, "Holiness to the Lord." And again, you can read Exodus for that. So it's very interesting how all this forehead stuff is going on, and it connects with the Jews and apostate Israel, particularly in the first century, as we're dealing with. All right? Now, this is very interesting stuff, so please stay alert here. Mystery Babylon is called the Great City. You can see all those references to that. Jerusalem is also called the Great City numerous times. You can see all those in Psalms. All right? Now, interestingly enough, the first reference to the Great City in Revelation identifies it as Jerusalem, which is also called spiritually Sodom and Egypt. All right? Let me read Revelation 11:8. It says, "And their dead bodies will lie in the streets of the great city, which mystically is called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified." Where was the Lord crucified? In Jerusalem. So this is clearly a reference to Jerusalem. All right? You can look in Isaiah there, and it talks about other things that talk about connecting Jerusalem to Sodom and such, and Gomorrah. Now, interestingly enough, Jerusalem is called Sodom and Egypt. And God judged Sodom with fire, as we know. Jesus predicted Jerusalem to be burned up. Mystery Babylon, first century, Jerusalem was burned with fire. See how all this connects? It's amazing. Interestingly enough, in the Old Testament, if the daughter of a priest played the whore, she was to be burned with fire. And here we got the mother of whores, the mother of harlots, first century Jerusalem, being burned up with fire. It's amazing how all this stuff connects. All right? Now, a judgment on Egypt with metaphoric judgment coming on clouds language, common in the apocalyptic genre that occurred in the Old Testament, as we're seeing also here. Much of this apocalyptic genre is in the Olivet Discourse and various places in the New Testament, and a lot of it is in Revelation. Now, what do I mean when I talk about judgment coming on clouds language? Well, first of all, we're connecting, it connects Jerusalem with Egypt, and Jerusalem is judged with the same type of way and language that Egypt was. And let me read about that here in Isaiah 19. Listen to this. This is very interesting. "The oracle concerning Egypt, behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. The idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence, and the heart of the Egyptians will melt with them. So I will incite Egyptians against Egyptians, and they will each fight against his brother, and each against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom." Some of the same language that Jesus speaks about in Matthew 24 as well. We know that this God didn't literally ride in on a swift cloud. This is judgment language, and the same kind of language is used speaking of the judgment to come in the first century on the city of Jerusalem and the temple. All right? Now, the same type of coming occurred in the judgment on Jerusalem, as I just mentioned here. Let me read a couple scriptures that do connect with that, and this could be studied out a lot more than we're going to get into here. So you can read the scriptures that I'm giving that I don't read, and please pray about this, and there's much more information I can get you if you email me. All right? And let me read here, first of all, Matthew 10:23. Jesus says, "But whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next, for truly I say to you, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes." So he's telling them, you won't even have time to go through these cities before the Son of Man comes. This can't be referring to the future coming of the Lord, because there's plenty of time to go through those cities. It's been 2,000 years, So, obviously, this is referring to a coming that was going to connect with this next verse I'm going to read in Matthew 16:28, where he says, Jesus again, "Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." And this is a little hard to understand, but he's talking about an event that's far enough away where many of them would be dead, but not all of them, because he said there are some standing here who will not taste death, or some that would stay alive to see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, which all connects with the judgment coming on Jerusalem and the city and the temple, which I haven't got time or space to get into much here. All right? Let's move along then. All right? Now, interestingly enough, again, those caught in adultery in the Old Testament were to be stoned, if you want to read there in Deuteronomy 22. Interestingly enough, in connection with what Revelation says, huge stones by the Romans. See, the Romans and the Jews got into it. That's what caused this whole deal with the Romans to wipe the city out. The zealous, apostate, rebellious Jews that were in there. Now, huge stones were catapulted by the Romans into Jerusalem in the war here. It's very interesting. Now, Revelation 16:21, it says, "And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent." That's a heavy stone. And it says, "And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great." Interestingly enough, the weight of the stones, as Josephus even records, was about the weight of a talent. So this language in Revelation connects right with the war and the stones the Romans catapulted in to wipe the Jews out in the first century war. All right? Now, along with sitting on a scarlet beast, the harlot sits on many waters, which are people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. You can read that in those verses there in Revelation 17. Now, this could be in connection to sitting on the beast or Roman Empire, which had conquered most of the world at that time. All right? That's one way or aspect of it. Now, Jews at that time were also in every nation on earth. On the day of Pentecost, it says there were Jews, devout men in Jerusalem from every nation under heaven. So the influence of Jerusalem had obviously gone worldwide. They were connected with and riding the beast that had conquered the world at that time. And Jerusalem was a major city, and as far as God was concerned, was the capital of the world here. So, very interesting how this all connects. All right? Now, the city was connected to the merchants of the earth or land. You can read that in Revelation 18. Now, Jerusalem in the first century was a merchant metropolis. It had wealth from God's favor and blessings from their past, production from Palestine, with many imported goods from other places. It indicates a vast array of goods common to the needs of their day. All right? Now, ancient Jewish writings inform us of no less than 118 different items from foreign lands that were going in and out of that city. Likely, very, very likely there was much more. All right? Now, the woman or whore was on the beast, having 7 heads, which are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. All right? Now, most people pick Rome because of this statement right here. The woman, harlot, apostate Israel, rides the beast. Says the woman sits on it. So this could be referring to sitting on Rome, which is known as the city on 7 hills. All right? That's one aspect or connection. But, however, interestingly, Jerusalem is also known as the city on 7 hills. This is well recognized in Jewish circles. For example, an 8th century Midrashic narrative makes reference to this as being well known and needing no defense. Jerusalem, situated on 7 hills, is also recorded in the Book of Legends, edited by Bialik and Revanitsky, something like that. And there's your page and paragraph. Here's the 7 hills that it's on. You can stop and look these up or contemplate these more. And there they are. Interestingly enough, the book of Psalms makes reference to the hills around Jerusalem. It says in 125:2 of Psalms, "As the mountains are about Jerusalem, so the Lord is about his people from henceforth even forever." This is most interesting. And you see how it all connects with the whore on the 7 hills. All right? The harlot was guilty of the blood of prophets, saints, martyrs, and all that were slain upon the earth. And you can read those verses, and we're going to look at some of these things that connect with this. Now, many verses speak of those guilty and being guilty of the blood of the prophets. All right? I'm going to look at Luke first in 50 and 51. And here Jesus says that the blood of all the prophets, which was shed from the foundation of the world, may be required of this generation. from the blood of Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, which perished between the altar and the temple. Verily I say unto you, it shall be required of this generation. All right? All right, moving along. Here, let me read now. I printed the whole verse out from Matthew 23, 35 to 38. Listen how clear this is, and it goes right along with Revelation. That upon you, he says now, may come, this is Jesus speaking, may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation, just like Luke mentioned. All right? O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathers her chickens under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate, which is referring to the temple, desolation of the temple. Now, the Old Testament makes a very similar remark about the city in Isaiah 1:21. Here it says, how is the faithful city become a harlot? It was full of judgment, righteousness lodged in it, but now murderers. History is repeating itself in the first century, and it's described in a very, very interesting and similar way. All right? How could another city possibly be in view when the same exact declaration is made of the harlot, first century Jerusalem? You can also look in the parable in Matthew 21 and Matthew 22. The parable of the vineyard in 21 talks about he sent his servants and they stoned and killed him, referring to the prophets. Matthew 22, it talks about people coming and they killed them. Clearly speaking of those that killed the prophets, which coincides and connects exactly with what this is talking about. All right? Here in Matthew 23, 35, we'll look at these couple verses again so you can see exactly how clear this pins on first century Jerusalem. He says that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, speaking to the Jews of the first century. Here in Revelation 18:24, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Incredible how both places mention all the blood. There's no blood left if they're guilty of all. Right? Pins it on first century Jerusalem, Mystery Babylon, apostate Israel. All right, the great city, Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots, is judged and destroyed. You can read those scriptures that all deal with that. And interestingly, Revelation 16 mentions the Euphrates drying up, so the kings of the east might be prepared. Notice I underline of. The word of comes from the same Greek word as the word from. So this is a reference to the direction from which the invading troops came, which happened in the first century. Now here, this is very interesting. The reference to the Euphrates drying up is likely alluding to a previous battle where in 536 BC, Cyrus the Persian, when the Persians ruled the world, they diverted the flow of the waters of the Euphrates, which went under the wall surrounding Babylon. Now, take note of that, surrounding Babylon. His troops went under the wall, which took Belshazzar by surprise, taking the city without much resistance. Interestingly, this similar occurrence took place with troops coming from the same river area, the Euphrates, this time not taking the city Babylon, but Mystery Babylon, first century Jerusalem. Once again, an incredible connection of events to other events here from Babylon to Mystery Babylon. All right? All right. Now, an amazing contrast between the harlot and the New Jerusalem. This is very interesting. An angel reveals them both to John. He's carried away in the spirit into the wilderness to see a woman on a scarlet beast. Right? He's carried away in the spirit to a great and high mountain to see the New Jerusalem. Also, I don't believe I put it in the notes here. If you read, I think it's Ezekiel 42, Ezekiel's carried away to a great high mountain to see a structure that's like a city with many parallels to the New Jerusalem. All right? And this mountain concept connects with the mountain. You can read Isaiah 2 about the mountain of the Lord house being all over the earth. And Daniel 2, the stone that comes becomes a great mountain. You can read Daniel 2, and I deal with that in my other videos about the last days and the ages. All right. They are both women. One's a harlot and one's the bride. 2 Corinthians 11:2 says, "For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." So one is a chaste virgin, a bride, and one is a harlot. Both women. They are both mothers. Galatians 4:25 and 26. We mentioned this earlier. Let me get into this again real quick. "For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all." Interesting. They are both cities, both mothers, both groups of people, both women. All right? They both represent covenants, both groups of people, both named Jerusalem. Apostate Israel, first century Jerusalem, connected to the first covenant. It's about to go down. You can read Hebrews 8:13, deals with that. Deal with that a little bit in the other video. Both are groups of people, both named Jerusalem. Both have connections to the kings of the earth. Very interesting. Let me read Revelation 17:2. It says, in relationship to the harlot, "with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication." Interestingly enough, in contrast, the relation of New Jerusalem to the kings of the earth, and it says, "And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it." So one of them has committed fornication with the kings of the earth. The other one, the kings of the earth, bring glory and honor to it. All right, let's move along. They are both connected to the sons of Abraham. You can study Galatians 4. There's a lot going on there that connects with a lot of this. We're just going to make a few points. Here in Galatians 4:22, it says, "For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise." You study this out and look, don't take my word for it. The apostate Jews in the first century in Jerusalem are connected with, in this Galatians 4, with Ishmael, the one born by the bondwoman, because they're in bondage, and the true believers are connected to the free woman. All right, study that out. You can see it for yourself. They are connected to two different hills, and Galatians 4:24 and 25 says, "Which things are an allegory, for these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Agar. For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, which and answers to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children." Why? Because they stayed in the old covenant, resisting the new. The other hill is referring to Mount Sion. You could also say it connects with the other hill of Mount Calvary, where Jesus died to purchase the new covenant. Here in Hebrews 12:18 through 23, it says, "For you are not come unto the mount that might be touched, and that burn with fire, nor into blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet, and the voice of words, which voice they heard, entreated them that word should not be spoken to them any more. For they could not endure that which was commanded, and if so much as a beast touched the mountain, it should be stoned, or thrust through with a dart. And so terrible was the sight, that Moses said, I exceedingly fear and quake." It says here, key verse 22, "But ye are come unto Mount Zion, unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect." He said, you are come, not will go in the future, but are come present tense, to Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. New Jerusalem is the saints of the church, the new city and temple. All right? New Jerusalem is the bride. That's pretty clear. I'll get into that here in a moment. All right? Jesus referred to believers as a city. Let me read Revelation 21:2 and 9. It says here, 21:2 of Revelation, "And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband." Connects with Hebrews 12:21, 9, and 10. This really sews it up. "And there came unto me one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials full of the seven last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit into a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Very interesting. The church is the New Jerusalem. It's just that simple. Study it out. He shows them the bride. God's not married to a building. God's not married to a city. God's married to people, and the people are spoken of and described here as a city and as a structure. And there's more scriptures here that I'm going to mention to show this here as we wind down. Matthew 5:14, Jesus says, "And you are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid." So here he connects believers as light and as a city on a hill, which is exactly the way it's describing New Jerusalem. Interestingly enough here, it says, "For you are laborers together with God. You are God's husbandry. You are God's building." Very interesting. All right? Believers are described as a structure, as I mentioned there in the verse in 1 Corinthians. Here in Ephesians 2, "Now therefore you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth into an holy temple in the Lord, in whom you are also builded together for an habitation of God through the Spirit." So you can see believers are described as being built in this big building with Jesus Christ the chief cornerstone. God's building all together grows into this holy temple. Interestingly enough, in Revelation, "Him that overcometh," it says, "will I make a pillar in the temple of my God." That's in 3:12 of Revelation. So the church, the people, believers were described as a building, as a structure, as a city on a hill, exactly in the same way that the bride, the New Jerusalem, is described. It connects so beautifully. Now the temple, the city, it says there's no temple there because God and the Lamb are the temple of it. Very, very interesting. Revelation 21:22, "And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it." Jesus said in John 2, he said, "Destroy this temple in 3 days, I'll raise it up." Speaking of himself. And if you read those scriptures there in 1 Corinthians 3 and 6, it talks about how we are the temple of the Holy Ghost. Amen. So you can see how this all connects. This is so awesome. Now, in review, first century Jerusalem fits as Mystery Babylon. It fits the time indicators in the context of Revelation, written to the churches, telling them of things which would soon come to be. Right? It fits the judgment of the city along with the parables and predictions of Jesus. Matthew 21, 22, 23. The prediction of the temple, city's destruction in 24. You can go back and read all that. Fits exactly what it's talking about. It fits as a mother in apostasy and bondage with the children. Galatians 4 talks about that. How he talks about it in Luke and different places. It fits as a woman riding a beast of the Roman Empire. It fits as a harlot, as also described in the Old Testament. It fits as a city on 7 hills and connected with the beast that's riding on 7 hills. How much clearer could it be? It fits the name given along with the other pagan city names it's called, with similar judgments that were described of Sodom and Egypt in the Old Testament. It fits as the only city guilty of all the righteous blood on the earth. How could any other city be in view when Jerusalem is pinned as the guilty one of all the righteous blood shed on the earth? It fits with contrasting parallels as we've seen to New Jerusalem. It fits as the book of Revelation reveals Christ Jesus as Israel's Messiah. It fits as the judgment vindicates Jesus as prophet, showing his prophecies from before, 40 years before when he was on earth. Because this happened in 70 AD when it was finished off. He predicted it 40 years early. He's vindicated as a prophet. He's vindicated as the one that purchased and implemented the new covenant. Also with his predictions of the judgment on those who continued in the old covenant, and he wiped it out. The Bible is the Old and New Testament, the Old and New Covenant. Testament means covenant. The book of Revelation primarily closes out with the wiping out of the city and the temple, thus ending those that can try to continue on in the old covenant that didn't accept the new. It reveals Jesus Christ as their Messiah, with his prophecies true, as the one that came to purchase the new covenant, and the one that judged and had the old one wiped out because they didn't accept him. Judged them for killing him. The punishment fits the crime. It came on the generation, the people that happened. It came with a time frame and a time indicators in Revelation, and in Matthew where it says, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled, in Matthew 24:34 and other places. It all connects so beautifully, and you can see it. So thank you so much for watching this. Email me if you have any questions. Love to hear from you. Love to talk to you, email you. And we'll go from there. And God bless you so much, and have a wonderful day in Jesus' name.